Let's talk about a couple of these players, Honky, that are going to have a impact much sooner than Caleb Benning wherever he goes, and it is Ochaun Mathis and Devin Drew. I mean, we've lost multiple defensive linemen this year. Some of them appear to be hot property on the transfer portal themselves. Casey Rogers picked up an Oregon offer. Jordan Riley's at Oregon as well. But it seems like we're restocking the cupboard here a little bit, and it was necessary, right? I mean, we needed to have some depth there, and in the case of Ochaun Mathis, an impact player as well.
Yeah, I think that the front seven depth discussion is really interesting, and we talked about this again with Benning last week, where if you think about it, the at least the body types you need that are defensive line body types, you can actually need less in a 4-man front than a 3-man front, because the 3-man front, all three guys need to be kind of a big defensive line body.
Right.
In the 4-man front, you really need the middle two guys to be that. And your outside two guys can be Mathis. They can be Garrett Nelson. They can be, Jamari Butler, Blaze Gunnerson. They're basically coming from what were your outside linebackers, and your big outside linebackers. This is almost like 1993 all over again, moving Trev Alberts up the D end and Dante Jones and Dwayne Harris. So if you think of it that way, I started kind of writing up a front seven depth chart here. And with Drew from Texas Tech committing today, I kind of think of him and Colton Feist. I'm going to have another name I'm going to have to learn. I kind of look at those guys as 1 and 2 as a 5 technique kind of D tackle, someone kind of up on the offensive tackle. The other D tackle, kind of the 1 to 3 technique, almost a nose tackle. I can look at like Robinson, Ty Robinson, Nash, those guys really manning that spot. So, think about 2 deep there. At DN, Garrett Nelson, Blaze Gunnerson, Ochaun Mathis, Jamari Butler. That's solid 2 deep depth right there. We're still looking at some more guys in the portal, at least. I know definitely at like one of the defensive tackle spots. It's a start. If you look at those, then the question becomes Tanner, because Tanner has been an outside linebacker or a DN. Think of him standing up and maybe being a Sam linebacker, strong side, or if they call it boundary now. I could see him kind of being in that position with Henrich at the middle, and then at the will or the field linebacker would be Reimer. And we've got a slew of guys behind him. Ernest Hausman, I could see definitely backing up Tanner. I could see Snodgrass behind Henrich. Malga Clements, I could see him. He needs to get on the field.
Yeah, I think so.
The guy's a playmaker. So
yeah.
And great. Then a wild card and all that is Kolarevich, which it looks like, he might be in the JoJo position next year, that nickel, but he certainly has experience at the linebacker.
Yeah, and that's an intriguing scenario there. I mean, he's test out of the world, right? So I mean, like, it's kind of intriguing to see if he could actually thrive in that spot. That's an intriguing idea. I still could see a little bit more depth added overall, especially at the interior positions. You can never have too many of those guys.
Yep.
But it's starting to look like something that could hold up over a season in the Big Ten. So, I mean, that's exactly what you want. And look, if you want to be a pessimist, Honky, you've mentioned this, and Rob, Omar Manning's a great example. Sometimes it takes longer than 1 year for someone who transfers in to kind of acclimate to the situation and thrive. And there's no guarantee that these transfers are going to be a solution. But if you get enough of them, you're going to have someone hit. And if you're not relying on them to be a full-time starter to begin with, that improves your odds anyway.
I think defensive guys, though, too, probably will get into a system a lot faster than offensive guys as well. I think that's one of the guys, the guy that I'll be talking to tomorrow, Carricker, he has his own podcast where he was talking a lot about this and how excited he is because Shenander's defense is, with a couple of these guys that they've added now, he's going to be able to really mix and match the defenses a lot more than what he was doing before with hiding different coverages and blitz packages and things like that, stuff that we haven't seen Nebraska do for the last 2 or 3 years, right? So
Sure.
and so he seems, and he's a defensive guy, so I'm really going to take his word on it, and I hope to talk to him about it more tomorrow and get some more detail. But he really seems excited for a couple of these guys, and he seems even more excited if we sign at least 1 or 2 more of the guys that we're looking at right now. So I mean, I love good defense, so especially watching guys blitz, and then I start thinking about guys like Nash, right? Like in the middle, what is he, like 6'9", like 480 pounds
like
or something?
6'6".
I know, I'm
he's not
joking,
as tall as some of the
but
other guys,
but he's just huge, right? He's a polar bear. But I mean, him plugging up the middle, and even at sometimes like opening up holes against the O-line for the blitzers to come through, things like that. It's just, I'm excited. I think if we continue to build like this, the defense might even be a step up from what it was last year.
So, Honky, if I was an optimist, I would point to something you mentioned to Damon Benning a few weeks ago, was that the transfer portal is a different beast when it comes to recruiting, in the sense that you can take someone like Devin Drew and you have 900 snaps of film on this guy playing Power 5 football at Texas Tech and saying, hey, I think this guy can work for us, right? And so when you do have an opportunity to offer someone like that to come in and make an impact, you have a lot more understanding of who you are getting actually, potentially, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point, how in the past we've talked about how important it is for a guy to be here for a full off season. The Omar Mannings, we brought up, some of the other players that have come in here, JUCO guys. These guys are different. I mean, 900 snaps at Texas Tech. Mathis has played an extensive amount at TCU. So those are guys that this is free agency. You're expecting these guys to be able to step in and fairly quickly adjust. What's the advantage? Both of these guys who are Big 12 guys, why would they want to come here versus some other school? Why did Mathis come here instead of Texas? You look at what the NFL draft is picking right now, and certainly guys leaving the Big 12, they have a lot to prove by coming in here and showing that they can hold up in the Big 10. And it's not an apples to apples thing. Doing something at Texas Tech or at TCU against that competition and coming here, that they've got a lot to prove, and they've got to show, and I'm sure that's what they're motivated by. Mathis wants to show that he can hold up well against the run, be stout against the run when you're going up against, a 400-pound, Minnesota lineman, or, the double tights and triple tights that you'll get from Wisconsin and Iowa. So, I think that's the motivation for those guys, but they need to be ready right away. That's for sure. And I think part of this exercise that we're going through right now, going through that front seven, and just, I went too deep, but I didn't even get into the, Messiah Newsom and Marquise Black and Raquan Buckley and Jalen Weaver and Brody Tagliafico. What I'm doing is I'm throwing scholarship names out there, and I'm doing it because you hear it too much on Twitter where it's just, oh my God, we have nobody. Our depth. What is going on? Frost is going to put a team out there without a defensive lineman. No, wait a second. Slow down, eat some dip. You'll be okay. We're gonna get some guys in here, and the transfer portal works both ways. We do have some bodies there, and I do think in switching that 3 to 4 man front, that can help change some of our depth. Just move some guys around a bit. But there are some bodies there, and I don't think that we're done with the portal along the way either.
Boomer, you're our Twitter expert, and the Ochaun Mathis commitment did generate some interesting Twitter buzz, even from folks like Stuart Mandel of The Athletic, saying that Nebraska lands the number 1 guy in the transfer portal, at least at this time. And some of that is related to the NIL implications of Ochaun Mathis. Obviously, it sounds like his family was treated really well when he came here. They really were very attentive, hit all the crossed all the X's and T's and all those type of things. But the NIL had to be a factor as well, right? And it's been interesting to see the kind of Twitter response to that.
I mean, they'll tell you it's not the main reason they came to a school, but it's likely a factor. I mean, there has to be some reason, you'd even offer put an NIL deal together. It's there to help just add that extra encouragement for a player to come here. But just from what I've heard, I don't know if that was the primary reason he came here. He talked a lot about just the organization of when he visited Nebraska, how on track everyone seemed to be, how they had coaches here already breaking down film of his, talking about, previous plays he'd done, what they hope to do with him. I think that was probably played as big of a role as anything, just in terms of how we were able to land Mathis, was just the better organization that Nebraska seemed to have on the coaching staff and the way it was, top to bottom, versus Texas, which seems to be in a little more disarray. It has been for years there, it seems. So, I think that was probably as big a help. So
Yeah, it's fair.
Rob, did you?
Yeah,
Rob?
one of the things too I read an article about, and I honestly don't know like if this is just kind of like for the papers, for the headlines or whatever, but Mathis's mom seemed to have played a big role in his decision as well, because of the way that she was treated. And even bigger, he has an autistic brother who they included him in everything during that weekend, during the spring weekend. They included his brother in just about everything, let him do everything that Mathis was doing. And his mom just said nobody else gave them that kind of treatment. And all of the visits that he had, no matter how many times he visited Texas, they never gave like her and her other son, her Mathis's brother, any kind of attention like that. So, I mean, it sounds to me like there was a little bit more. I mean, sure, I'm like Boomer said, the NIL is probably playing a factor in there, but there was some other things too that I think people tend to overlook or just don't get talked about as much that's going on at Nebraska that's different than it was the last few years. So,
Sure.
What was the question that I think Kurt Payne, Boomer? Could you put that one back up?
I got it for you.
I sure can, right there.
Oh,
or was. All right. Thanks, Rob. All right, we got it here. Yep.
You guys fighting over it? Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, Dave, what do you think of this? Are players realizing that are from Texas Tech and TCU that the Big 12 won't be a Power 5 conference in a couple of years with Texas and Oklahoma going to the SEC? Obviously, that doesn't have a direct effect in these two guys, Drew and Mathis.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
No. I mean, to your point, I think the time frame for Ochaun Mathis in particular, which is really a one and done scenario here for Nebraska, and even Devin Drew, because Texas and Oklahoma are still stuck there for potentially a couple more years, didn't seem to have any impact on their decisions.
Yeah, that is a good question, though. Yeah, what impact that will have. I mean, if you look at a school like Cincinnati, how many players did they manage to put in the draft this last week?
9.
It was a lot. So
insane.
Nine times.
Texas didn't put any, so it's not like,
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's a little hard to tie that together. I mean, it's a whole other topic to talk about a super conference, mega conference type thing where a TCU or Texas Tech isn't in it. But that is far enough away still that I don't think it's impacting recruiting yet. At some point, could,